There you are. Right on time, as always. Settle in. Pull that blanket up just so and listen closely. Tonight's story carries a chill upon the salt breeze. Don't worry, I'll stay with you till the end. Tonight's tale is called The Ghost Light of Harrow Point. Between jagged cliffs and the restless shoals of Blackwater Bay stands Harrow Point Lighthouse. By day, its whitewashed walls gleam against granite rock. By night, its single lantern spins a watchful eye across the sea. Locals say that on moonless nights, when fog drifting like a restless tide, a second light appears far below, bobbing along the rocks where no path leads and no keeper dares tread. That is the ghost light. Blue, wavering, and mournful, it calls out to fishermen, sailors, and the lonely, guiding some to safety and others to their ruin. Seasoned keeper Margaret Maggie Calder had lived and worked at Harrow Point for 5 years without witnessing the ghost light until this storm-tossed evening. Maggie arrived at the station towerside, suitcase in hand, under a pale, drizzling sky. She had taken over when Keeper Sutton disappeared into fog 2 months prior, leaving little but a journal entry and a tattered oilskin coat. Maggie promised to keep the lamp burning for every soul on the waves. That first day passed in routine, checking lenses, polishing brass, logging each revolution of the lamp's pedestal. She learned the temperature gauge, the sea level chronometer, and even the lighthouse cat Murphy, a mottled gray who purred at her boots. As dusk fell, the wind sharpened, sending waves thundering against the breakwater. Maggie ascended to the lantern room, lit the wick, and set the lamp's great wheel turning. Below, the spray leapt skyward in white arcs. Above, gulls wheeled against molten clouds. She secured the hatch and leaned against the railing, watching the 3-mile beam slice through the gloom. Her breath hung in the air like soft smoke. The bay seemed to listen, water still under her watch. Then, from the corner of her eye, Maggie glimpsed a pale glimmer far down along the rocky shore, an orb of light, low and wavering, dancing where no path lay. Her heart skipped. The ghost light. She pressed her palm to the cold glass. Murphy mewed and brushed her ankle tail high. Maggie knelt, wiping raindrops from the lantern's pane. Through the prism of wet glass, the distant glow pulsed twice, thrice, as if beckoning. She traced its path, always just beyond the lamp's beam, always at the edge of sight. The keeper's journal Sutton left behind lay open on a nearby crate. Its last entry read, August 17th, witching hour. I climbed to the rocks, thinking I could face the ghost light. It danced away, until it turned back, blue as a bruise. I saw something in its glow, and it saw me. I cannot delete this line. Maggie swallowed. No footnotes followed. No closure. A cold wind rattled the lantern's grate. Murphy hissed for bristling. Maggie closed the journal and tucked it into her coat. No keeper before her had ventured beyond the lighthouse in search of the ghost light. Sutton never returned, but the glow still pulsed, a soft cry for company. She rose and secured the lamp's flame. With care, she descended the spiral stairs, Murphy padding beside her. The door at the base of the tower bore a warning brass plaque. Caution, slippery rocks, no keeper beyond this point. She paused. Beyond the door lay a narrow path carved into stone, leading down to a jagged cove. Sea foam hissed below. Her duty was to keep the lamp burning inside. Yet the ghost light called, pulling her footsteps out into the storm. She wrapped her oilskin tighter and stepped into spray. Murphy trailed a few paces behind, tail curled. The path wound downward in slick gray steps, each carved by time and tide. Maggie's lantern shimmered in one hand, her journal in the other. The distant glow bobbed, guiding her deeper into the roar of waves. As she reached the bottom, the ghost light paused above a tide pool, hidden among barnacled rocks. Maggie knelt on a larger boulder, setting her lantern beside her. Through the haze, she saw the light more clearly, a trembling orb of pale aquamarine, flickering like a heartbeat. She reached toward it, but Murphy lunged forward, claws scrabbling, fur bristling, and let out a plaintive warning cry. Maggie froze, breath caught in her throat. The tide pool at her feet rippled, though no breeze stirred, and from its depths emerged a pale hand, dripping seaweed and sand. followed by the torso of a small child, hair a tendril of slick seagrass, eyes luminous as pearls. The figure stepped forth, water sluicing from its soaked jacket. The ghost light pulsed in its palm like a living lantern. Maggie's lantern slipped from her grasp, smashing on stone. Its flame guttered and died. In the hush, the child spoke in a voice like distant gull cries. "Keeper, why have you come?" Maggie's heart hammered. I saw the ghost light, and I wanted to help." The child tilted its head, water dripping from its chin. "Help me find rest." Then the ghost light pulsed thrice, once for time lost, once for time remembered, once for time to come. Before Maggie could reply, a wave surged, sweeping around her ankles. The tide had risen faster than she realized. She lunged for the child's hand, but Murphy darted between them, a growl rumbling in his throat. The tide withdrew as quickly as it came, leaving the child kneeling in a shallow pool, the ghost light quivering before its chest. The hush lingered. Maggie's mind raced. She had broken every rule, left the safety of the lamp room, ventured into the cove. Yet here stood the ghost of Harrow Point, waiting for her answer. She swallowed, voice trembling. I'll help you rest. Please show me how." The child's eyes flickered. It extended a hand, and the ghost light drifted toward Maggie's journal. Waterlogged pages fluttered as the orb's glow passed over them, revealing words previously faded. "I am Lily Harrow, daughter of Keeper Harrow. I fell into the sea in a storm, and they never found me. My lantern guided them, but I am still here." Maggie recognized the name. Keeper Harrow, first lighthouse keeper a century ago. Lily never returned from her father's rescue attempt. Over the years, her ghostly lantern had drawn many to their doom. Lily's eyes glistened. "I wrote letters asking Father to find me, but he lit his lamp and waited all night. He never came down to me." Maggie felt tears sting her cheeks. "I'll help you write a final letter, one Father can read, one the rain can't wash away." Lily's nod was a pale shimmer, but as Maggie reached for her journal, the child's form flickered. A distant crack of thunder rolled across the bay. Lily's ghostly voice echoed, "Hurry before the tide returns." Maggie snapped the journal shut, grasping Lily's hand. She turned toward the path up the cliffs. The ghost light pulsed like a heartbeat, guiding them home. The waves outside rose in silver crescendos as Margaret Maggie Calder climbed back into the lantern room, Rose Garrick's final plea still echoing in her mind. She secured the hatch behind her and set the brass lantern on its hook, its glow steady and reassuring. Murphy the cat wound between her boots, purring as though sensing peace. Yet Maggie could not shake the trepidation that lingered in the corners of the lamp room. She returned to the desk where the keeper's journal lay open to Lily's story. By lantern light, she reread the torn entry. "I fell into the sea in a storm and waited below for Father's light. Guide me home." The words faded against the page's ragged edges. Maggie closed the journal and tucked it into her coat. Her first act: coronate Lily's sacrifice by ensuring no other soul would succumb to the ghost light's lure. Before dawn broke, Maggie performed her routine checks, cleaned the lens, trimmed the wick, and ensured the lamp's mechanism clicked in perfect rhythm. Then, when the tower's beam swept the horizon, she descended the narrow stairs to inspect the forecast. In the small logbook cabinet, she found the weather charts from Keeper Sutton's last entries. They recorded an unusual pattern. The ghost light appeared only after westerly gales above 20 knots coinciding with full moon nights. Tonight was neither full moon nor gale, yet the ghost light had appeared. That meant its curse had grown stronger, no longer bound by natural conditions. Maggie felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. She fetched the lamp room binoculars and scanned Blackwater Bay. The sea lay glassy calm. Far below, no flicker betrayed the ghostly glow. It seemed to vanish by daylight, yet its call would return with the next storm. Maggie resolved to warn the townsfolk. She climbed down to the keeper's quarters and stoked the small stove. Murphy curled on a blanket. She poured a cup of tea and settled by the window, writing a note for the harbor master. Ghost light seen beyond the breakwater. Advise all fishing vessels to keep clear of Cove's Mouth at night. Keeper Calder. She tucked the note inside a waterproof pouch and clipped it to the first mate's deckhand whistle. Then she placed it on the shore path, certain it would reach the harbor by morning. Yet as she turned, a soft tapping sounded at the window. She peered into the fog. No figure stood outside, only thick mist and the lone beam from the lighthouse. She exhaled and returned to her desk, heart still fluttering. By midday, Maggie felt the lamp room's isolation. Even Murphy seemed listless, watching the doors of expecting entry. Maggie fetched Muriel's almanac from the bookshelves, a tome that cataloged every strange phenomenon in Greyport's lore. She found a scribbled footnote under Harrow Point ghosts. When ghost light beckons, one must offer communion at tide's edge, a token of their sorrow, to break the bond. Maggie's brow furrowed. What communion? What token? She pressed her palm to the almanac, as though it might reveal its secrets through touch. The pages whispered beneath her fingers. Rose's letter, petals in water, child's toy left ashore. A chill clutched her. Below, the tide pool where Lily had first appeared lay hidden beneath the cliffs. It was accessible only at the bay's lowest ebb, 3 hours before dawn. Checking her watch on the desk, 2 a.m., Maggie realized she had 2 hours before the tide receded enough to expose the pool. She needed to prepare. The rest of the afternoon remained agonizingly routine. She checked oil levels, logged the lamp's revolutions, polished brass fixtures, and made small talk with supply cart drivers. But her mind raced. Communion at tide's edge. What could she offer? Lily's carved heart pendant. A scrap of cloth from Rose's frock, or perhaps a flower pressed in water, as the almanac hinted. As dusk fell once more, Maggie readied herself. She packed a small leather satchel, the torn lantern room journal, a handful of rose petals she plucked from the courtyard's single blooming rose bush, and the brass lantern. Murphy darted around her legs, tail high, as though sensing the urgency. She climbed the cliff path past the keeper's cottage and into the hush of approaching night. The sea glimmered under the first sliver of moon, despite earlier clouds. The wind remained calm, an unsettling quiet. Maggie reached the gate at the cliff's crest, locked to keep visitors at bay. She slid it open and crept down the rocky trail, lantern bobbing. Below, the tide bay shimmered. Seaweed draped the boulders. Water rippled over submerged stones. Maggie stepped carefully across slippery rock ledges, each footfall measured. She found the tide pool, shallow, round, surrounded by barnacled stone. Inside floated pale moonlight and the echo of past loss. Maggie knelt, opening the satchel. She scattered rose petals onto the still water surface. The petals drifted, turning slowly until they formed a loose circle. Then she placed a torn journal page in the center, the one Lily had signed. As it touched water, the petals quivered as though stirred by unseen breath. A sudden hush fell, the sea still beyond the pool's rim. Maggie rose and stepped back. She waited, heart pounding. Within seconds, the ghost light emerged, blue, wavering, high above the tide pool's edge, just like before. It hovered above the petals and page, casting long shadows across the wet stone. Maggie swallowed, voice trembling. Lily we have remembered. The ghostly orb dipped toward the pool. As it brushed the water's surface, the rose petals glowed and a soft sob echoed from the cliffs. The petals lifted on a gentle current, drifting into the lantern's glow as though drawn by a magnet. Then the orb descended further until it rested on the torn page, illuminating Lily's fading handwriting. Maggie watched, tears springing. The orb hovered, pulsed twice, then shot upward in a brilliant flare that lit the cliffs like daylight. In that flash, Maggie saw a figure perched on a rock ledge above, the ghostly form of Lily, free from the water's pull, watching with a peaceful smile. As the flare subsided, Lily's form wavered, then dissolved into motes of blue light, each mote drifting toward the sea, rising on spirals of mist and disappearing into the sky. The petals sank, carrying Lily's page, and touched the water's mirrored surface before drifting beneath the returning tide. Maggie knelt, snuffed out her lantern's flame, and clasped her hands. The hush lingered, a moment of holy silence where grief met release. Then the tide began to surge, reclaiming every petal and memory. She rose, heart quieted, and climbed back to the lighthouse. Once inside, She relit the lamp. Its amber beam swept over the sea, now calm and empty. Murphy brushed against her boots, purring at her side. In the lamp room, Maggie spread a fresh page in a journal and wrote, October 28th, 2:45 a.m. Communion offered at tide's edge with rose petals and lily's page. Ghost light freed. Child spirit crossed beyond. The sea is still. Keeper Calder. She closed the journal gently, laying it in her satchel alongside the almanac. She felt the weight of grief and hope balanced in her palm. Tomorrow, the townsfolk would awaken to tranquil waters and steady winds. But tonight, Maggie Calder knew that remembrance and simple acts of compassion could heal even the deepest sorrow. She glanced at Murphy, then at the sea, then at the steady spin of the lamp's great wheel. The ghost-like curse had lifted, but the whisper of memory remained bound to the cliffs and hearts of those who listened. Maggie Calder woke the next morning to a pale sunrise breaching the horizon. The sea lay calm, the sky clear, an uncharacteristic peace after nights of storm and shadow. She dressed quickly, donning her oilskin and sturdy boots, and descended to the keeper's quarters where Murphy stretched by the hearth. With the journal and almanac tucked under her arm, she set out for the cliff's crest. Below, the trail to the tide pool lay hidden in grass, but Maggie retraced her steps by memory. As she climbed, she considered Keeper Sutton's final words in Lily Harrow's plea. Somewhere beyond the pool, the child's final fragments must lie, perhaps in a labyrinth of caves along the shore. At the edge of the cliff, she paused. A stone outcropping revealed a narrow fissure, just wide enough to admit a determined keeper. She slipped through, lantern in hand, and found herself in a dank cavern where the air was cool and heavy with spray. The walls glistened with moisture, and the echo of distant waves drummed in her ears like a heartbeat. Maggie advanced slowly, guiding Murphy ahead, who padded with cautious grace. The passage twisted downward, each step carved into basalt. She passed clusters of sea anemones clinging to rock, tiny pink blossoms of a hidden reef world. Further on, the tunnel opened into a higher chamber lit by a shaft of midday sun filtering through an unseen crack far above. In the center lay a stone dais, upon which rested a small wooden box, weathered, barnacled at the edges, its lid bound with rope. Maggie knelt, gingerly untying the cord. Beneath the lid lay 3 objects. 1, a silver locket, tarnished with salt, bearing Lily's name engraved in a child's cursive. 2, a folded scrap of vellum, edge singed with a single rune, an hourglass entwined with seaweed. 3, a small ceramic doll head, its face cracked but eyes still gleaming with painted life. Her breath caught. The locket must have belonged to Lily, the token Lily had carried. The rune matched one in the almanac's communion list. The doll's head, perhaps Rose's Teddy's counterpart, had fallen into the sea but survived here. Each fragment carried Lily's memory and sorrow. Maggie placed them carefully into her satchel. As she did, a low groan rose from the chamber's far wall. She snapped her lantern upward and saw the stone shift, revealing a narrow crevice leading deeper. Through the slit she glimpsed flickering light, as though another ghost light waited below. Murphy hissed and bristled. Maggie's heart pounded in sympathy with the distant surge of water. She pressed forward, shoulders squared, drawing on resolve beyond fear. The crevice opened into a larger grotto, its walls carved by centuries of wave and wind. Puddles gathered in tide-worn hollows, reflecting the lone beam of Maggie's lantern. At the grotto's center, a shallow pool held water black as ink. Beneath its surface glowed streaks of pale blue, remnants of the ghost light's energy. Maggie set down her satchel and knelt at the pool's edge. She removed the rune scrap of vellum and held it above the water. The rune pulsed once, an invitation. She dipped it into the pool, and ripples of blue light spread outward, illuminating carvings on the grotto walls. When child's heart beats and storms embrace, a token of love unbinds her place. Return what's lost of water and stone, and guide her spirit back to home. The verse matched Lily's tale. Her heart lost to the sea, her spirit bound to rock and tide. Maggie closed her eyes. She removed the silver locket from her satchel and, hearing its tiny clasp click, held it aloft. "This belonged to you, Lily," she whispered. May it guide you home. She opened the locket. Inside gleamed a tiny portrait. A girl's face painted on ivory, eyes bright. Maggie lowered it into the pool. The water swallowed it in a swirl of color. The pool's pale blue light flared, then steadied, bathing the grotto in ethereal glow. Maggie heard a voice behind her, soft, childlike. She whirled, lantern raised, and saw Lily's ghostly form drifting from the shadows. This time, the child wore her locket. Her hair fell in damp tendrils, and her eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you, Lily murmured. I feel lighter. Maggie nodded. We'll finish this. One more fragment. She reached into her satchel and drew the ceramic doll head. Lily's lips trembled at its sight. Our toy, she whispered. I left it in the tower. Maggie rose, lantern in hand. Then let's go. She guided Lily deeper into grotto toward a narrow flight of stairs carved into rock leading upward, back toward the lighthouse. Together, they climbed, the runic pool's glow fading behind, replaced by the lamp room's golden light above. Maggie opened the hatch. The wind carried a hint of rain. She settled Lily on the desk and set the lamp to burn low, soft enough for a child's eyes. Lily's ghost knelt beside the desk. Maggie set the doll head before her. This must rest where your lantern shines, she said. Lily reached out, placing the head atop the monk's bench, and then used shelf near the hatch. As soon as the porcelain touched wood, the lamp pulsed in response, flickering once before burning steady. The lamp's rotation slowed, and the giant beam held on a single point, the doll head's perch. In its warm glow, Lily's doll body, long lost, molded from sea-damp cloth, emerged from thin air. The doll sat together again, porcelain head and cloth body, reunited. Lily hugged it to her chest, tears of joy glimmering. Maggie watched as the ghost child's form began to fade. First her legs, then torso, until only spirit remained. Lily held the doll aloft and whispered, I'm going home. Lily's image burst into pale motes that spiraled upward to the hatch, merging with the lantern's beam, then vanishing into the night. The lamp's light swung back to its steady arc. Murphy brushed against Maggie's boots in greeting. Maggie exhaled, her heart light. The haunting verses had been fulfilled. Communion offered, fragments reunited. The child's plea answered. She closed the hatch and rose to her full height. The lamp room's glass walls framed Blackwater Bay, calm now under drifting stars. No flicker of ghostly blue remained. Maggie closed the journal, now full of Lily's final verse and her own notes. October 29th, midnight. Recovered Lily's locket, rune, and toy. Completed communion in grotto. Spirit freed. She locked the journal in her satchel, ready for safekeeping. The ghost light of Harrow Point, once a mournful beacon, had been laid to rest. The sky above Harrow Point darkened to a roiling mass of charcoal as Maggie Calder climbed the spiral stairs for her final act. The wind had shifted, snatching at her oilskin with frantic urgency. The lantern room's steel door groaned under gusts that rattled its bolts. At the threshold, Murphy pressed close, ears flat, eyes wide. Maggie secured a hatch and lit the great lamp's flame. Its beam wavered once, as if in recognition of the tempest's threat, then blazed forth in valiant arcs across the bay. Below, the sea rose in furious crescendos, waves crashing against the rocks in thunderous applause. Rain pounded the glass in sheets of cold needles. Maggie felt the tower shudder with each impact. She clutched the keeper's journal, the final blank section titled Lily Harrow's Departure, and thrust it into her satchel alongside the almanac. Tonight she would write the letter that bound a child's ghost no longer to the points and ledges, but back to her father's waiting arms. Lightning forked in the sky, illuminating the lens room in white fire. Maggie set her brass lantern on the railing, its steady glow offering a small sanctuary. She opened her satchel and withdrew a fresh sheet of vellum. Above her, the lamp's grate will pause in its spin, as though granting her the silence she needed. Ink quill in hand, Maggie placed a drop of oil lamp residue into the inkwell to fortify the ink against the storm. She exhaled once, steadying her voice, then bowed her head over the page. Father, I waited in the shadow of your lamp and called to you each night. My lantern glowed below where no footsteps dared tread. I was lost in the waves, but your light found me. Forgive me for my fear, and know that my heart remains yours. I love you beyond every tide and storm. Come find me and bring me home. As her quill stroked the final words, the lamp room grew eerily still. The beacon outside hesitated, its beam drifting before finding its arc again. Maggie closed the journal and tucked it away. In the lantern's glow, she saw her reflection, resolute and pale. From the shadows at the door's edge came a dripping footstep. Maggie turned, heart pounding. There, framed by the glass panes, stood Lily Harrow, her form more solid now, damp curls clinging to her cheeks, eyes wide with hope and sorrow. In one hand, she held the small brass lantern that had once guided so many to peril. In the other, a tattered oilskin cap, the keeper's mark. "Father," Lily whispered, voice thin as fog. "Did you write?" Her gaze fell to Maggie's cloaked figure. "Did you help me?" Maggie stepped forward slowly. "I wrote your final letter. It wrote itself in my heart." She offered a trembling smile. "Come forward, Lily." Lily took a hesitant step toward Maggie. Each footfall dripped seawater onto the floorboards, etching slick trails that gleamed in the lantern's light. Maggie knelt, opening the keeper's journal once more to the blank page labeled delivery. She drew her quill and uncapped the ink. Delivered at Harrow Point during the storm of October by Keeper Calder. May this letter reunite Lily Harrow with her father's faith. She signed and flicked the quill upward. Lily's eyes glowed as though the words lifted a heavy veil. The ghost child reached forward, fingertips brushing the open journal page. In that instant, the lantern room dimmed. Only the brass lantern at Lily's side glowed, its flame flickering ecstatically. A thunderous crack split the night. The sea's roar fell silent. A hush so profound that Maggie could hear her own heartbeat. Lightning crackled through the glass, illuminating a second figure appearing behind Lily. Keeper Harrow himself, spectral and worn. His face, lined by time and grief, softened as he gazed at his daughter. "Lily," he breathed, voice echoing like surf upon stone. He reached out, and though his hand passed through her form, the lantern's glow intensified, fusing both figures in one amber radiance. Lily stepped into her father's arms. The lantern she held lifted upward between them, the brass handle shining bright. The journal and letter floated free from Maggie's hands, pages turning in an unseen breeze. The great lamp's beam swiveled to lock onto the trio as they stood beneath its light. Keeper Harrow knelt to Daisy's side, no longer a ghostly remnant, but whole in spectral union, and read the letter aloud. "I love you beyond every tide and storm." The words echoed through the dome. Magically, lantern and lamp merged into a single pillar of light that pierced the turbulent clouds. Rain fell in 1,000 points, each drop glinting like a gemstone. The ghost pair glowed brightly, then began to dissolve. First the father, then Lily, until only their voices remained, carried on the wind. "Thank you for setting us free." The lantern room's gust subsided, replaced by a steady hum of the lamp's engine. The great beacon resumed its rhythm, its beams slicing to the final wisps of fog. Maggie collapsed to her knees, tears streaking her face. Murphy leapt onto her lap, purring as though reassuring her that all was well. Maggie reached up and relit the brass lantern at its hook. Its flame, unperturbed by wind or water, burned steady and bright, an emblem of peace restored. Above, the clouds parted to reveal a lone star. In the hush, Maggie whispered a vow. "I will tend this light for every lost soul who calls." She retrieved the final letter and placed it within the keeper's journal, sealing it with candle wax. The pages rustled shut, preserving Lily's final farewell and her father's redemption. As dawn approached, the first rays of pink light seeped through the tower's windows. Maggie stood, lantern in hand, and opened the hatch. The steady beam welcomed her home. Dawn's first pale light filtered through the lantern room's glass, tracing golden arcs across Maggie Calder's weary shoulders. The storm had broken. Blackwater Bay lay calm beneath a pastel sky. Maggie descended the spiral stairs, Murphy padding at her heels, and emerged onto the cliff balustrade. Below, the waves lapped gently against the rocks, No sign of the furious gale that had roared through the night. She paused at the hatch threshold, inhaling salt-sweet air. The keeper's journal lay open on the brass desk, its final pages. Lily Harrow's departure and Margaret's own redemptive letter, illuminated by the still warm lantern light. Maggie bowed her head, offering silent thanks to the child's spirit, to the fathers who guided, and to every keeper who attended this lamp before her. Her first task, seal the journal for posterity. She closed its covers and tied the binding with a length of sea blue ribbon. Then she locked it in the steel vault built into the tower's wall, alongside the asylum chest and the ghostlight petitions. The vault door bore a single engraved rune, the hourglass entwined with seaweed, a symbol of broken time made whole again. Maggie slid the key into a leather pouch and hung it on her belt. Next, she ascended to the lamp room, where the great lens waited. She refilled the oil reservoir, trimmed the wick's char, and polished the brass reflectors until they gleamed. Each motion felt sacred, an act of remembrance more than routine maintenance. Murphy watched from the railing, whiskers twitching in the warm glow. When the lamp burned bright once more, Maggie lowered the brass lantern from its hook and placed it on the desk beside a single rose petal, a last token of communion at tide's edge. She extinguished its flame, letting the day's sunlight fill the room instead. The lamp's mechanism clicked in perfect rhythm, the keeper's legacy now secured in every measured sweep of light. Outside, the town of Greyport stirred awake. Fishermen hailed from the quay. Children skipped along the sandspit, and lights winked in cottages lining the harbor. Each face turned toward Harrow Point's beam in grateful acknowledgement. The lighthouse, battered by wind and wave, had once again guided them through darkness. Maggie climbed the cliff path back to the keeper's cottage, journal and almanac in hand. Inside, she stoked the dying embers of last night's fire. She brewed a pot of strong tea and sat at the small table by the window. Murphy settled in her lap. Opening the almanac to the ghost light's entry, she added a footnote. And on the storm of October 29th, Keeper Calder offered communion of rose petals, locket, and toy at tide's edge, releasing Lily Harrow's spirit and ending Harrow Point's phantom beacon. Beneath the note, she drew a small illustration of the tide pool, daisies of barnacle and seaweed framing a lone lantern. Then she closed the book, the almanac's spine sighing with completion. She rose and set the teapot aside. Outside, the sky cleared to a gentle blue, scattered clouds drifting like ghosts departing on a breeze. Maggie stepped onto the porch and gazed down at the sea. Far below where Lily had first appeared, a single rose blossom lay on the sand, petals spread like a star. The tide was low. The flower alone testified to last night's communion. Maggie dipped her fingertips in the shallows, toy and locket long since carried off by the sea, and gathered a handful of wet sand. She pressed it to her heart, whispering a final vow. I will remember you, Lily, and keep this light so others never feel lost. Murphy mewed in agreement. Maggie smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She knew her watch would not end here. Another storm would one day come. Another soul might call. Yet Harrow Point's ghost light, once a mournful lure, had been reborn as a memory of love, compassion, and the keeper's steadfast courage. Inside the cottage, Maggie opened a cupboard and reached for a small wooden box carved with the island's rune. Inside lay the brass key, the journal, the almanac, and now a single rose petal pressed flat and preserved in resin. She slipped the box shut and placed it on a high shelf, ready for the next keeper who would one day arrive, lantern in hand, to face the night's call. Outside, Harrow Point Lighthouse stood proud against the dawn, its beam unwavering. The wind stirred its sails just enough to whisper of new journeys, new callings, and new stories waiting to be told around the hearth. Maggie Calder watched the horizon until the sun crested the waves, then turned and went inside, her heart at rest, knowing that in guiding the lost, she had found the light within herself. That's the end of tonight's tale. I hope it gave you a little chill and a lot of calm. With any luck, you're already sound asleep. Didn't even hear the ending. But if you're still awake, how about another? Sleep well, dream better, and I'll see you next time.